Hello, I will be reading another short story from the book Bites and Bones. This one is called YNK, or You Never Know, by Todd Strasser. Let's have it, Johnny. Rows from Callie Jones's desk, Mr. Burton stood over Johnny Lynn with his hand out. But I thought it was off, Mr. Burton, Johnny Lynn pleaded. I swear. Now, Mr. Burton snapped angrily. Johnny reached into his pocket and handed Mr. Burton his phone. The English teacher returned to the front of the classroom. I am so tired of all of you fooling around with these phones in class. If you want this phone back, Johnny, have one of your parents come see me. But, Johnny began to stammer, but quickly stopped when Mr. Burton furrowed his brow and glared at him. Hands under her desk, Callie glanced at her friend Mandy in the back of the room and texted, CSG, chuckle, snicker, grin. A moment later, Callie's phone vibrated. She peeked down and saw SH up arrow. Shut up. What? Callie thought, shocked by the reply. She twisted around and gave Mandy a brief, puzzled glance. Why would she text that? Callie, Mr. Burton said sharply, is there something back there you find interesting? Callie quickly turned around and faced forward again. Later, after the period ended, she waited for Mandy in the hallway. Why did you text me to shut up? Callie asked. Mandy scowled at her. Did not. Did too. Callie opened her phone and pointed at the screen. It came from your phone. Well, I didn't send it, okay? Mandy said. How can you say you didn't send it? Callie asked, still pointing at the message. That's your number, and that means it came from your phone. Then the phone company's messed up, because I didn't send it, Mandy insisted. Didn't you see what happened to Johnny? You'd have to be completely stupid to text in Burton's classroom. She headed into her next class. Callie continued down the hall, totally annoyed with her friend. It was so obvious that Mandy had sent the text. Why wouldn't she just fess up? Her next class was Spanish, with Miss Arnold. As Callie entered the room, the Spanish teacher handed her a test sheet and said, I hope you studied your vocabulary. Callie gasped. She'd forgotten about the test. At her desk, she stared at the sheet and realized she hardly knew any of the answers. Class began. All around her, kids scribbled on their sheets. Callie quietly took out her phone and held it behind her desk where Miss Arnold couldn't see it. With one hand, she texted her friend David on the other side of the classroom. Caliente? A moment later, she felt the phone vibrate. She pretended to yawn and glanced down at her lap. The text read, Don't cheat. Callie couldn't believe it. Why were her friends being such jerks today? And it wasn't like she was really cheating. Normally she knew what caliente meant. She just couldn't remember it at that moment. Next she texted her friend Alyssa, who was also in the class, and asked her what the word meant. The text that came back read, MYOB, mind your own business. Callie felt like screaming. When she thought about all the times she'd helped her friends on their tests, it was unbelievable. She couldn't wait until class was over. As soon as she got out into the hall, she would give David and Alyssa a piece of her mind that they would never forget. It wasn't long before class ended. Callie hadn't even bothered to finish the test. What was the point when she hardly knew any of the answers? She'd failed. But so what? There'd be more tests that semester. As long as she passed the next few, she'd probably pass for the year. And anyway, right now she was way more concerned about telling David and Alyssa a thing or two. Callie handed in her test and headed for the door, but Gina Harmon stood in her path. Callie groaned inside. Gina was a loser with ratty hair and small reptilian teeth who wanted to be in Callie's crowd. The only times Callie and her friends let Gina hang around was when they could send her on errands to buy granola bars from the vending machine or get books what they needed from the library. But today, Gina was the last person in the world Callie wanted to see. The previous week, Gina had worn the cutest, brand new pink rhinestone hoodie to school, and Callie asked if she could borrow it for the weekend. Of course, Gina was thrilled to let Callie wear the hoodie, even though she'd made her promise to be careful with it, because it had been a birthday present from her favorite aunt. Callie wore it to Brandy Callahan's birthday party on Saturday night. Gina wasn't invited, and stupid Grant Chimmin managed to spill grape juice all over it. The hoodie was completely ruined, and it wasn't even Callie's fault. It was so unfair. Now, all week, Gina had been bothering Callie about bringing back the hoodie to school because her stupid aunt was coming to visit that weekend and would expect Gina to wear it. "Hi, Callie. I hope you remembered my hoodie," Gina asked. "Oh my gosh," Callie pretended to gasp. "I'm so sorry. Can you believe I forgot it again?" Gina's shoulders slumped down with disappointment, and the corners of her mouth turned down. "This is the 4th day in a row you've forgotten. Tomorrow's Friday, and my aunt's coming. You can't forget to bring it tomorrow. Promise?" "I totally promise," Callie said, even though she knew she might have to pretend to be sick and stay home the next day, just to avoid Gina. And that wouldn't be easy, since she'd already missed way too many days that semester. "Gotta get to my next class. See you later." Callie got out of the classroom and looked for Alyssa and David. She spotted them down at the end of the hall, talking and laughing with none other than Grant Chimman herself. "Perfect," Callie thought as she marched toward them. "I'll tell off Alyssa and David for not helping me on the test, and I'll tell Grant that it's his fault that Gina's hoodie got ruined, and he'd better figure out a way how to replace it, and fast." Just then, she felt her phone vibrate. She flipped it open. The text message read, "Don't lie." Callie stopped and frowned. A lie, she thought. Who had she lied to? She realized that it must have meant telling Gina she'd bring the hoodie to school tomorrow. But that wasn't really a lie, because lunars like Gina don't count. Callie smirked to herself and started again toward her friends. Now that she knew what was going on, they'd all gotten together to play a trick on her. They were sending her these stupid text messages and pretending they weren't, as if their phones had minds of their own. Callie started walking faster, like she couldn't wait to get in their faces and tell them they were busted. But then she slowed down. She just had a better idea. At lunchtime, Callie waited until she saw Gina enter the cafeteria. She made sure she accidentally got on the lunch line beside her. "Oh, hi, Gina," she said with a big smile. Gina smiled back uncertainly. "Hi." It wasn't surprising that she was being wary, since the only other time Callie had acted friendly to her was when she wanted to borrow the pink hoodie. "So, what looks good today?" Callie asked as they slid their trays down the rail. "Nothing," Gina replied. Callie pretended to laugh. "You're funny." Gina smiled sheepishly. "Well, it's true. Since when does anything they serve here ever look good?" "True that," Callie agreed, as if Gina had just said the wisest and most profound thing ever. The cell phone in her pocket vibrated, and Callie flipped it open. The text read, "Don't be phony." Callie snapped the phone shut. She was beyond tired of her friend's jokes. She and Gina paid the cashier and went into the cafeteria. Usually, this would be an awkward moment, because Callie would walk toward the table where her friends sat, and a table Gina had never been invited to. "Want to sit with us?" Callie asked. Gina's eyes widened with surprise. Sure." They headed for the table where Mandy, David, Alyssa, and Grant were already sitting. Callie was certain that Gina was thrilled. "Hey guys, I asked Gina to sit with us today," Callie said, and sat down. Gina sat beside her. Both girls placed their backpacks on the floor. "Oh gosh," Callie suddenly said, "I forgot to get silverware." "I'll get it," Gina said, eager to be helpful and liked. She jumped up and headed back to the lunch line. "Why'd you invite her to sit with us?" Alyssa whispered as soon as Gina was out of earshot. "Why not?" Callie asked innocently. Meanwhile, she reached down to the outside pocket on Gina's backpack. "She's the only one here who hasn't pretended they didn't text me today." Callie slid her hand into the pocket of the backpack and quietly took out Gina's phone. In the meantime, she felt her own phone start to vibrate, but she didn't bother to check it. She was sure it was from one of her friends playing another trick on her. "Would you get off that already?" Mandy said, annoyed. "I told you before, I didn't text you." Callie looked at the others. "What about the rest of you?" David, Alyssa, and Grant shook their heads. Callie focused on David and Alyssa. "You guys didn't didn't get a text from me during the Spanish test, asking what caliente meant?" "No," Alyssa said. David took out his phone and thumbed through his messages. He showed the list to Callie. "You didn't text me. So you erased it. What does that prove?" Gina came back with the silverware, and everyone had lunch. Just before the period ended, while Callie was returning her tray to the kitchen, her cell phone vibrated. She opened it, knowing there'd be 2 messages, the one she hadn't checked at the table, and now a new one. The text read, "Don't steal and don't use people." Callie rolled her eyes and shook her head. She was really getting tired of this. As if someone had heard her, Callie's phone didn't vibrate again for the rest of the school day. Neither did Gina's phone, because after Callie took it, she turned it off and put it in her pocket. Callie wasn't worried that Gina would discover that her phone was missing. Kids were always losing their phones. Usually, if you waited a day or two, someone would find it for it and call you. When school ended, Callie walked home with Gina's cell phone in her backpack. She had the perfect plan. Later that evening, she would text all her friends from Gina's phone, saying that she, Gina, was having a big party the next night and would pay everyone $10 each to attend. Callie was certain Gina would find out and be so embarrassed that she wouldn't dare set foot in the school the next day. And then Callie wouldn't have to worry about bringing the hoodie. It was early January and very cold. Icicles hung from the bare branches of the trees, and a thick white cloud came out with each breath Callie took. She listened to her iPod as she walked home. The streets and sidewalks were icy, and several times she started to slip and had to catch herself to keep from falling. When she got to her street, she saw an old lady taking bags of groceries out of her car. Callie had seen the woman before. Sorry for the cut, I had to go do something. Anyways, where were we? It was early January and very cold. Icicles hung from the bare branches of the trees, and a thick white cloud came out with each breath Callie took. She listened to her iPod as she walked home. The streets and sidewalks were icy, and several times she started to slip and had to catch herself to keep from falling. When she got to her street, she saw an old lady taking bags of groceries out of her car. Callie had seen the woman before and knew she had a bad hip. She limped and winced in pain and when she walked, and in these icy conditions, she had to keep one hand on her car to brace herself. Callie saw that the back of her car was filled with bags of groceries. The old lady would have to make a lot of trips to get all of those groceries inside. Callie's cell phone vibrated. The message read, "Be helpful." She stopped and looked around. Somewhere nearby, her friend had to be hiding behind a car or a tree and giggling. They must have followed her home. But Callie didn't care. It was a stupid trick and had gotten old really fast. She felt sorry for whoever was sending her these texts, because obviously they had nothing better to do with their time. Meanwhile, she had no intention of helping the old woman. She should have known that if she bought a lot of groceries, she'd have to make a lot of trips. Callie continued on the sidewalk. Her house was on the next block, and to get to it, she had to cross the intersection at the bottom of a hill. The intersection was always busy. She waited until the light turned green. As she stepped off the curb, the phone in her pocket vibrated. Callie flipped open the phone. The text read, "Stop." Callie stopped. Suddenly, a loud horn blared. A huge truck barreled down the hill, hit a patch of ice, and skidded right through the intersection. The truck roared past, and the wind from it ruffled Callie's coat. The blood drained from her face as she felt lightheaded. Trembling, she turned and went back to the curb. If she had not stopped to read that text message, the truck would have had run her over. Still shaking, Callie looked around. One of her friends must have seen the truck coming and sent the text, right? But there was no one in sight. And even if they'd seen the truck coming down the hill, how could they have known it would hit the ice and skid? Once it had started to skid, there hadn't been nearly enough time for someone to compose and send a text. Callie felt a shiver, which wasn't caused by the cold. What if her friends had been telling the truth? What if they hadn't sent those texts? She made sure the intersection was clear and crossed the street. While she continued toward home, the phone, clutched tightly in her hand, vibrated again. With trembling fingers, she flipped it open. The message read, "This is your last chance. From now on, listen to what I say." And that is that one. Hope you enjoyed.